This program features interviews covering subjects that some listeners may find triggering. Topics that could be discussed include suicide, self-harm, drug addiction, mental illness, domestic violence, and gang violence. Opinions expressed here on the Why You Crying Fu podcast do not represent Reshaping Identity, 805, or any supporting organizations. This program is made possible and part of the state-funded California Creative Corps through a grant awarded by the California Arts Council and administered locally by the Ventura County Arts Council.
Yeah, my name is Martinez. I'm an old advocate here in Ventura County in Los Angeles. Birthday 7/20/1963. My mom at that time, my mom was 16 and a half. My mom was born December 16th. You know, it all started back, and it goes into my story about how my dad picked up my mother talking about, would you like some candy, little girl? That kind of leads into my life and what happened to me. My mom at that time, when she was 15 years old, she was living with my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And my mom was very promiscuous. My mom also came from a broken situation. So my mom was able to go into bars and she was able to pass for a woman, I was told. You know, what I was told is my mom used to get sodas, Coca-Colas back in the day. The big thing was when you went into a bar and you got a Coca-Cola, you could throw peanuts in the Coca-Cola. But I understand my mom also had alcohol in the Coca-Cola, and I was aware that my mom took men home, or men took her home. That's my mom. My mom went to Westchester High School, and so did I. And my mom was beautiful. Some say, you know, the term that we use today is my mom was thick. My mom was beautiful. You know, my mom was walking down Manchester Boulevard away from Westchester High School, and I have a father by the name of Horacio Francisco Martinez. My family's connected to the La Opinion newspaper. My grandfather is a known individual, they call them Lito, who was connected to the Lozano family, who originated the paper when they came from Mexico. When it originally started, my grandfather worked for La Prensa newspaper. So my mom was walking down Manchester Boulevard, and my father was an adult at that time and very vain, big ego. And he pulled over in his nice car and he said to my mom, he said, would you like some candy, little girl? And my mom said yes. She did. She got in the car with him and they ended up having a relationship and my mom ended up sleeping with my father. And my mom ended up was pregnant with me when 15 and a half. So you got to remember, my mom's 15 and a half. She's taking care of my great-grandmother, taking care of her mother who had diabetes, and now she's pregnant with Lang. So at that time, my father knew he had to make a decision because of being part of the Martinez family, and he lived with them. While he was living with them, my father was still going to school, and he wanted to be an engineer, which he eventually did with Hughes Aircraft. So what happened is during the pregnancy, my mom was about six and a half months pregnant with me, and my grandmother died. When her mom died, my mom was so angry. And the first thing she wanted to do, like we all do, is we want to blame. The only person we can blame is blame God. God took away her mother at a time that she needed her mother at the most. You know, the stories are told about my mom walking into a church. The church was packed, and my mom walked into the church, and she turned around, 6 and a half months pregnant with me, and she turned around, and she said, I want all you to know that God took away my mother. And my mom said, fuck God. There is no God. My mom was broken. So I think my dad found some accountability or responsibility, and he ended up marrying my mom, and there was my great-grandmother, so they ended up moving into a house over by the Westchester Golf Course. So by moving into that house, probably paid for by the Martinez family, my mom eventually had me. But the problem is that when women have babies, they put on excess weight. And I did mention in the beginning, my mom was thick. So by having the excess weight with me, she no longer became desirable to my father. And my father had a problem with that. So He wanted to punish my mother. So what he did is he ended up putting on locks on the refrigerator, locks on the cupboard, and he wanted to make my mom go outside to exercise so that she would lose the weight, so she'd be more desirable to him. The one thing my father did do immediately after having me is my father went and had a vasectomy. Within 90 days from the time that he had me, knowing and living with the fact that a man did that at the age of 18 years old, 19 years old, and went and had a vasectomy, I was able to come to the terms that my dad never wanted me. He never wanted anything to do and never definitely to have another Lang in his life. My mom made the decision at that time that she wasn't going to take the abuse, but it ended up finally happening when my father pulled in the driveway with a young girl. My mom couldn't take it no more, but my dad figured that obviously he didn't want us, but it was a way to push my mom out. But my father knew that the Martinez family would take me. So what my mom did, so my mom packed up. There was some money left over prior from a house sale. And my great-grandmother, my mother, and me, we went to an apartment. And at that time, my mom learned how to work. My mom wasn't a prostitute, but my mom did is she learned how to work, and we called that slinging hash. She was a waitress. My mom was a waitress. My mom did belly dancing. My mom did whatever she had to do to make sure that she could take care of Lang. She used to sing songs to me, little Lang, my little Lang. When my mom took me away from the Martinez family came to my mother and they said, Karen, you can't take care of Lang. That, we can, we have the money. He has his grandparents, he has his aunts, his uncles, he's got his cousins, and Lang can have a good life. Why don't you give us Lang? And my mom basically told those people to go fuck themselves, that I was hers, Looking back at that, would life have been different? Absolutely. But would I ever change the time or the memories that I have of my mom? I wouldn't. So growing up with my mom and her turning that down, the family paid $150 a month for me. I didn't know who my father was. But the thing most women want to do is they want to put a father in a man's life. So my mom ended up in a relationship with my stepfather, Gary, who is my father. My father ended up marrying my mother. And that happened when I was 1.5 years old, so it wasn't long at all that my mom found somebody. Growing up in that family, my name was Lang Huff, H-O-U-G-H, and that's what I grew up in school by. So when you get baptized, they didn't have adoptions back in that day. What you did is you got baptized, and the name that you got baptized under is the name that you went with legally. So the legal name was Lang Patrick Huff. By my dad marrying my mother, my dad did take on my great-grandmother, and I love him for that. He took my great-grandmother, and he treated her with respect. And he never put hands on my mom. My mom could be mean at times. My dad never put hands on him. Coming from that alcoholic family, that was my father. It's the best, he's my dad. So I was raised by a white family, but the white family that I was raised by were alcoholics, raving alcoholics, and they were violent. My father wasn't violent. He never put his hands on me, but one time, and I'll get to that. And it's a long story. So I came with a family that were alcoholics, and they were in the race business. That's when you had race dirt and that, when you had open wheel modifieds. We had a place called Ascot Park. To get through the story fast, as growing up, just a little bit about them. Growing up in that family, it was very racist as far as Mexicans and as far as black people. So growing up in that family, I used to go to the grandparents. They knew I was Mexican. I didn't know I was Mexican. So being in that environment, things were always taken out on me. So grandfather would end up hitting me or he would end up beating me. I didn't get treated right. I was heavy. I was called bull in a china shop. And there was always some type of assault or some type of verbiage to me. And we finally bought a house over on 94th Street. It was a small house, 900 square feet. At this time, I'm getting visits from this Mexican. He's my Uncle Horace. So I got nice clothes. My brother and sister don't have it. There's confusion there. My Uncle Skip had a body shop. It was called Skip's Auto Body. And he had a motorcycle. He came to the house one time, and he had cuts on him and scars on him. And, growing up in that part of 94th Street, it's part of Inglewood, Westchester. So where there's Westchester, Lenox, and there's a lot of blacks and a lot of Hispanics. So Skip comes in and he hands my dad a gun and he says, Gary, he says, put this away. And my dad says, what did you do, Skip? My uncle, he killed 3 black people. He said, I got him, Gary. My mom didn't want him around. So the story goes, to speed it up a little bit, that's what I came up with. So when I was 11 years old, I used to hang out with my cousin Rodney. And my aunt was Aunt Sandy. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, but she also drank. And I remember I was over at Rodney's and we were playing racetracks, and we were doing the Tyco thing. And the mail guy came, and Sandy got the mail, and she said, "Oh, the mailman's Rodney's dad." And I said, "What are you talking about, Aunt Sandy?" He says, "Well, my brother Gary's not your dad." And I said, I didn't understand. "Well, your father's a Horace." And I said, "A what?" Like a horse, not an animal, but your dad's name's Horace. Your name's Lang Martinez, not Lang Huff. Your father's name's Horace Martinez, after a horse. I didn't understand. There was confusion. I'm 11 years old, going to parochial school. Because there was money coming from the Martinez family. Now all of a sudden, I'm not understanding. And I remember it was funny to them. And I remember getting in the car with my mother, and I told my mom what took place, and she was very upset. That also became a change in my life too, drastically, because now it was known that I was Lang Martinez, even though I carried the name Huff. So I remember I go home, and they pulled me in the room, and my dad looked at me, and he said, "I'm very sorry, but yes, Lang, I'm your father. I'm your stepfather, but I am your father, and you're my son." And I had to deal with that, so I had the name. So now that comes into play, so there was some visitations from the Martinez family. So now I know Horace is my father, and Horace is explaining to me that Gary's my dad and he's a good man, and there's confusion. So I'm going to mansions and Thousand Oaks, and I'm with people. I'm in parades, dressing in sombreros because they were part of the community. And my cousin was Miss California in 1982, Suzanne DeWan. So that's that. So I'm getting part of that. Christmas, grandma doesn't speak English. She's in the hallway. When you got the marble floors, and Mijo. You know what I mean? And a pinch on the cheeks, and then you go to the bathroom, and you got the rolled up $1 bills, $5 bills, and then you go home to your stepbrother and stepsister, and they're not understanding because you're wearing nice stuff, and then you're going in the bathroom, and you're undoing the paper rubber band, and you're counting, you got 40 or 50 bucks, and they got nothing, and that it was wrong when you look at it. So one of the things about the Huff family is that they were really in the car racing, and you had Winston West, and then at that time you had the Times 500, that was out on Ontario Speedway. That was the big thing, for us to watch car races, boxings, and stuff like that. You listen to boxing, and I remember with my dad, you'd listen to boxing on the radio, and we'd get pennies. He won this round, he won that round. Ali. And we would do that together. There was a time that we didn't like motorcycles, and always wanted a motorcycle. We had a mini bike, and it was up at the lake, so we grew up at the lake. But I always wanted a mini bike, so Uncle Larry ended up getting a mini bike for us, and he got the other cousins a mini bike. So I'm past 11, and there's a family get together. And I didn't go. I stayed home and watched Grandma. My great grandma. I was like her favorite. We had Shakey's Pizza across, down off Arborvitae, and we'd always get a pizza, and stuff like that. And one day I'm home with Grandma, and the phone rings, and there's this hysterical person on it, and it's my mother. Lang, where is she? Where is she? I can't understand it. My dad gets on the phone. And the phone hangs up, and my dad shows up like 15 minutes later, and he walks in the house, and he sees Grandma's okay, great grandma's okay, and I took an ass whipping. I just took a whipping, understanding. There was tears in his eyes, And what happened was is somebody called my mother, pretending it was me and saying that grandma died. That was my Uncle Skip. And my dad stopped and he was real sorry. It wasn't broken bones, but I got, you know what I mean? I should. Yeah, I mean, it was a sick joke, but I can understand, you know what I mean? Grandma's sitting on the couch and I'm sitting there watching TV and he walks in, just got a call from Lang that grandma's dead. You know, my mom's hysterical and you know, you're going to react. You know what I mean? It wasn't, you know, he was very sorry. You know what I mean? He was very sorry that took place. So as I was telling you about hating motorcycles, we'll get on to it, is I'm around 14 and a half, 15 years old, and you can have your permit, and I'm in high school, and you can have your permit. There was a guy I used to hang around with, Don Adams, and he had this 175 Enduro. He was going to sell it to me, so it had a license plate on it. So I go over and I pick it up and I push it to the house over on 94th Street. I used to hang out with my neighbors, Steve Hayward and his friends, and we'd play pumpkin ball with Robbie and everybody. He was a Vietnam vet and had guys that were vets, that were combat. They'd come over and they would drink. He had a kid named Robbie Rodriguez. We'd play pumpkin ball. Pumpkin balls where he had this big fat pumpkin ball and, you know, you couldn't hit it too far. So he happened to be outside that day, and I pushed this motorcycle home. And I knew how the family hated motorcycles because my other uncle I never met died in a motorcycle in Tijuana on a head-on collision. So they were against motorcycles. So I pushed the bike home, and I'm going to show it to my dad. I don't drive it. My uncle Skip pulls up, and my great-grandmother's on the porch, and my Uncle Skip's screaming and yelling at me. He had no right to. I didn't ride it. I pushed it there. It was parked. He just went crazy. My grandmother stuck up for me. My great-grandmother said something, and Skip said something very disrespectful, like, "You old bitch." And Steve Hayward got involved. So Steve Hayward, he comes over, been drinking. You got two other Vietnam vets. They've been drinking. Steve comes over, says, "Hey, man, you want to discipline the child. You discipline the child, but you're not going to talk to the old woman like that." And Skip says, "Okay, we'll see." Skip takes off because that's what I grew up in, and he picked up other family members, cousins, brought a bunch of people over. When he brought a bunch of people over, there was more people than Steve had, but Steve was, you know, they were combat Vietnam vets. One of the guys had a softball, and my dad was downstairs, and Skip and some cousins and some other people were out in two carloads, and they came out. And the guy threw a softball, not the pumpkin ball, but threw a ball that hit my dad in the head in the square of the temple, and it pushed the temple into his brain. My dad went down. He's going to die, and cops are called, ambulances, and he ends up going to Daniel Freeman. They take him. My mom's in Grass Valley at this time, so we got the neighbors. I'm home with my great-grandmother. So my dad's in the hospital, Daniel Freeman. We can't find anything. They got to, you know, shave his head, go in, and pull the temple out of his brain. We don't know. And Skip comes. Skip pulls up in the driveway. He comes out of the car, and he's carrying a knife. And he comes into the house, and I run to the back wall. In the back wall, it's concrete. And Steve saved me again, and ended up breaking his nose. So they actually had to take me, and I had to stay with Darcy and Charlie. Charlie was an ex-Vietnam vet, too, that lived around the corner, was a friend until my mom got there. But I couldn't handle it. It was my father, you know. So what happened is I found a friend to drive me to the hospital. So when I went to Daniel Freeman, I'm in the hospital in the lobby area, and the family's there. And they were all mad at me, and they blamed me. "He's not your dad. What are you doing here?" And it was late at night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. My mom's brother, who is my uncle, Tom, was a paramedic. He happened to be there when they were threatening me. And my Uncle Tom said nothing. Skip and them said, "Get your fucking nephew out of here," and stuff like that. And he said to me, "Lang, what are you doing here?" And John Wilson ended up taking me home. So I kind of grew up in that craziness. There's more stories. So as time goes on, as you get the gist of the broken. So now I'm in high school. I've gone from parochial school. Now I've gone to a regular school. I work in a bike shop. So I work at a place called Action Cycle. So I race BMX, and I race like Team Thruster, Team Kurahara, and stuff like that. And I played ball. Grades weren't very good. Still going by the name of Lang Huff, and I'm in 11th grade. But I'm making a little bit of money, and I'm losing weight. And I'm trying to find that girlfriend, but I can't because I'm I'm heavy set and I got man boobs, and back then, you're learning about the weed and they got the black beauties and, and that does it. So my buddy of mine tells me about this place and he says, you can cut glass. He goes, there's this guy, and the name of the business, it was called Mirror-esque. Well, Mirror-esque was a glass cutting place and it was owned by this guy, Kevin Scott Hamilton, who had a partner named Christian Allen Designs. Christian Allen Designs was stained glass. Kevin owned the other part. So it was a big place located on Manchester. And what you did is you make designs out, you cut the glass, make designs out of it, you water sand it, put it on board, and you could display it. And it used to go in the Broadway, J.C. Penney's, Monkey Wards, or whatever like that. And it went in different places. Kevin was doing the stained glass, you could make pictures out of birds, stuff like that. This guy, Christian Allen, used to be Kevin's significant other. But they started the business together. So you had Christian Allen over here, and we had Mirror-esque. Mirror's much more there. So a lot of guys were working at that place, and they said, Lang, you can get this job, and you can have a good time. This guy does coke, and everybody back then was interested in coke, but you couldn't afford the $25 or $50. So what happened is I ended up quitting, and I go to work there, and I'm cutting glass, and I remember we ended up getting a half gram one time. It's a half gram. It's $25 a piece, and you notice it's gone in no time at all. So what happened is I'm working for this guy, and it's all young boys there. It's young boys. Hispanics are taken care of as far as the painting, the other part, the sanding, and there's some other people. And I knew Kevin. Kevin was seeing one of the guys there or something like that, Christian, to be jealous. And Kevin pulled me to the side and he said, do you want to make a lot of money? I'm going to teach you the cocaine business. And I said, yeah. So I learned everything there was about it. Cocaine back then, and anybody wanted to do something was just to put something up your nose, And people in the club just wanted to put something up their nose. And if you're getting it from the right person, you're making high profit. So the person that he was getting it from was a known club owner named Eddie Nash. Eddie Nash owned a club called the Odyssey. Eddie Nash owned a lot of clubs. He owned some strip clubs. He was in the porno business. His first club that he had actually caught on fire as well in 1981. I can't remember the name of that. So what happened is I would do this, and I would end up taking this stuff at night, and I'd drive nice cars, whether it was a Porsche 59 T-Bird, 57 T-Bird. I'd drive nice cars and stuff like that, get all the cocaine I wanted. And I would go to the Odyssey with Kevin. In the Odyssey, you had security, you had young, mostly, it was a place where people said you could find your identity, but there was no identity to be found there. You had a bar, and this place was open from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning. You had runaways, you had stars, you had everybody that was there, broken, fixed, whatever. So my job was to go out there and be on the dance floor and to get off the coke. But you had a club from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the morning, and it made no sense. It was the fact that they were sex trafficking young boys out of that club. Eddie Nash was involved in the porno business. He was connected to two different adult clubs. And what happened is by having broken people in that, and what they were doing is Kevin and another person by the name of Lenny Benjamin, LB, would sit there and they would groom. And I felt like it was like, it's what took place, and I didn't understand it until I got older, what I was really a part of and what they used me for. So the Odyssey being the club of all ages, the tabloid show, there was never any bust. Neighbors would be complaining about it. They'd find condoms, they'd find needles, they'd find all kinds of paraphernalia. But the Odyssey really never had no heat on it. The security, there was actually LAPD, they're called Moonlighters, and that was confirmed by a guy named Mark Zavala, who worked internal affairs at that time. He worked Hollywood as a regular street cop, and he used to go in there because of the security. In the Odyssey, different bands would show up and stuff like that, and what I did is I would sell the coke to them in the bathrooms. Back then you had the Quaaludes and you had the Black Beauties. You would have men there. So what happened is the individual that I was with would be finding out who was worthwhile, and then what happened is that individual would get passed on to another individual, and that individual would get taken outside, and they'd get taken away in the car, and they were taken to other old men. Some of them were producers, some of them were movie stars. Some of the stuff would just take place right there in the bathroom. Every night that I was there, Kevin ended up taking home somebody. The thing with Kevin is by taking home somebody and having some other young boy was the fact that they would fight against each other. And these were people that were underage. but Kevin had the cocaine and we had the penthouse in Marina del Rey. Kevin had the cars and stuff like that. And you would go on to the next and this person was broken. And next thing you know, it was bad. The thing about the groomer is the groomer will do anything to get whatever he wants from you, being a narcissistic individual, and it's all about him. Eddie had some clubs, so the other clubs I didn't go to, but I went to other clubs. So I went to places like the Chamois, the Motherlode, Studio 12, and stuff like that. And then I also took care of the Star Strip. The Star Strip was a known club with the best looking. It was a club that was all naked. I think it's still open today. So I could pull up in there. The security guard would be there, and I would go right into the club, and I would take care of business, drop off. And I had two bodyguards. I had a bodyguard named Kazi, and I had another one named Anthony, who ended up being a pedophile, and they ended up killing him, I was told. I remember some of the things going in back then, and it goes back to my mom's story about you want some candy, little girl. Is back in that day, there was sayings, you were eye candy. You know what I mean? Here comes some eye candy. There was all kinds of terms. Back in those days, you would go to different clubs and stuff like that. You would walk into a club, and I'd be carrying a package, and I'd have to go to the bar, and you'd take out the package. That guy wants to take it back, so he wants to do it and see how blue it gets. Then the money comes, so you get the beer. It's going to take some time. Your guy's in the car, and you'd walk in these places, and guys would be dressed like the Judas Priest thing. They'd be dressed in leather with their asses showing and the whistles. And you'd get the whistles, but I was a badass, and I had somebody in the car. So you'd grab the beer and you'd go into the bathroom, and you sit down, you put your Heineken down, you take a couple things, and you look over to the right of you, and you got this hole there, and you got some motherfucker peeking at you on the other side, and he wants to try to solicit you because you're a young boy. It was sick. And that shit, I was able to say, you don't want to do that to me. You know what I mean? And then I'd take off. I'd get my money. Kazi would come in. He was a fighter, a paid mercenary fighter, and he'd come in and shit would happen. But I'd be around stuff like that, and there'd be men having sex, blowing each other. You'd walk in, you'd drop off packages. It was crazy. Back then too, you got in the freebasing, and the freebasing is when you'd start going to these Hollywood parties, and the next thing you know, whether it's a husband or a boyfriend, they would come up to me, and at that time I'd lost weight, I'm good looking, and they would talk about, my wife would like to watch. There was shit like that going on all the time with people freebasing. It was the craziest thing, So I would get calls, and there was certain people, stars and stuff that I knew. I got a call one time, and said you had to go do a package in the Valley. It was a one-time thing, and I ended up getting off the 405 freeway, and we went down Parthenia, and we got out this White House, and at this White House, it had this black rabbit, and a Cabernet rabbit, and it had a regular fence, and I get out, and I knock on the door, and the guy that opened the door was Big Jim Brown, the guy that took care of O.J. Simpson. So Big Jim Brown saw me, and he told me to sit my ass down, and he got on the phone, and he was all pissed off. I was a minor, and I remember I'm sitting there, and he's on the phone, he's fucking talking bad, this fucking kid. And I remember I looked over, and Big Jim, is he hit Big Jim? And I look over to the right, and Richard Pryor was there. He was in his fucking boxers. He maybe looked 110 pounds. He's not that big of a guy. The hair's out like this. He's got a towel around his fucking neck, no shirt on, and he's holding his fucking pipe, and he's yelling his ear. I got to see stuff like that, plus some other people. Kevin ended up meeting, there's Tatum O'Neal, Ryan O'Neal, there's Griffin O'Neal, the O'Neal family. Ryan O'Neal was going out. He was with Farrah Fawcett when she passed away. Tatum is the daughter, and they ended up doing that movie Paper Moon or whatever. Tatum, they've all had problems in their life. Ryan drinking, Farrah, and Griffin and whatever. Kevin had relationships with Griffin O'Neal. I was there. Griffin got away somehow from Kevin. And I remember Kevin was upset. I don't know the exact story. But we ended up driving in the hills to where Brian O'Neill lived, and Kevin ended up getting on top of the car and put a whole clip in the car and put his hand over the car and shot a bunch of rounds at a mansion, whether he hit or not, just because he was pissed that he could no longer be with Griffin. But he had a relationship. And dealing in the cocaine with Kevin, you were dealing with people that were cartel, because that was Eddie Nash. So you were dealing with major people, because Eddie Nash was known for controlling all the coke in Hollywood. It was the stars, everybody. Eddie Nash was called, he was called a gangster. So Eddie Nash had the coke from the Colombians, and it was called, the Peruvian flake and stuff like that. So these people sometimes would come to Miresque, where I was at. Some of them, they were the gangster. And there was this one guy, Fofi, and Fofi had this big ass gun. He'd pull it out and had this barrel, and he'd joke around with me and stuff like that. And having the name Huff, I told my name's really Martinez, so I had that Mexican thing, and they knew I was just a kid. So you would end up getting it, and then you would end up cutting it. The situation got so bad that I had a girlfriend in the Valley, and my best friend Kurt Bodecker wanted to see me. He missed me. He was my best friend. So I went and I picked up Kurt in the car, and I brought him over there. And we're in the warehouse where the coke was. Nobody was there. And the first thing I do to Kurt is I had a 9mm, and I gave Kurt this 38. And people used to break in. So behind us was Jack in the Box, and then we had a drop off just in case to get rid of it. And what happened was we heard some noise in the paint booth, but we really might have been rats, so we ended up going back there. And Kurt was standing behind me, and next thing I know, I heard a boom, and Kurt ended up pulling the trigger on a 38 behind my ear. We're just kids. There was other stories that people didn't pay their debts, and they'd go get robbed, and then what happened is they'd get kidnapped and brought back because Kevin would end up owing debt to them. What I was taught was with Kevin is that you always had to take the beef. We were in Marina Del Rey one time, and they were already honest. My mom had him under investigation, and we're driving a 57 T-Bird, and the narcs pull up on us on Admiralty Way, and they find a quarter pound in the car, and I was taught, so what happened is it was narcotics, it was the sheriff's department, so they take you down to the Coast Guard, and when they had us handcuffed, Kevin basically ended up looking at me, and I knew, and I ended up telling them, it was mine. They ended up releasing Kevin, and then what happened from Kevin is I would go down the station, Mom would come in and get released, and I'd go right back to him. My mom loved me. By this time, there's more stories to tell, you get the gist of it. Is my mom sat across the street, and she would watch this place, and how it kind of works about my mom's love for me is my mom was in a meeting for mothers, that had problem children. How my mom found out what my involvement was is after the meeting, this lady walks up and says, "Is your son's name Lang?" "Yeah, do you have a picture of him?" The lady was one of the owners of a place called New World. New World was located on Market Street. It was a head shop. And what happened is that's where you got your cut and your scales. So we had an account. You know what I mean? We'd run up tabs of a couple thousands of dollars. I would go there and pick it up. And this lady is the one that told my mom what I was into. So my mom used to hang out, contact the authorities, and she would hang out across the street. And my mom had a gun in the car, and I had a 10-year-old sister in the car. And my mom was watching the whole time. And my mom pulls up on Kevin, and she gets out of the car, and she puts a gun to his head. And she says, "I want you to stay away from my property." Kevin reaches down. He whispers something to my mother. We don't know what. My mom ends up backing up. She ends up leaving. To take off on that story, my sister didn't tell me about what happened to her until a couple of years ago. My sister always said that Mom never loved her. You know what I mean? And then my sister finally told me that she was in the back seat of that car when Mom had the gun. So, Mom loved you, Lang. Or she wouldn't have done this to me. And today, my sister's active in addiction. So being a part of this, it's around Christmas time, 1980, and this goes to the groomer. There's a lot we can add to how they groom, but I watched it. But how I was groomed is I was Kevin's right hand. I had the bodyguard. There was a gun. I had cars. I had the money. He never touched me. I had a girlfriend. He did his thing. I used to think about, no, not me, but it was always going to be me. It was always going to be me. He was going to have me. It was always going to be me. So I would sit there and it was happening to you, but not me. But I was really not understanding it because they're young people. But to me, it looked consensual. You know what I mean? But that's not me. I'm not. I got a girlfriend, but it happened. So what happened is it was Christmas time. It was 1980, and we had a big party. And Kevin was wearing this pull down or whatever, with the sleeves off, whatever, the goose down, and he had all this money on him. 1,000, maybe 20,000, whatever. And he did some mushrooms and he was high and there's tons of people there and he's showing off, he's throwing these things down. You know what I mean? So I see this, I'm with Kurt and hang on. So I go, okay, Kevin, you got to stop, man. What the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? The bodyguards weren't there at that time. I'm grabbing him and he's like, thank you, Lang. And at that time he took opportunity, he reached down and he kissed me. And I remember he put this kiss on me, and I was stunned. And what can I say? When I go through therapy, you tell these things because there starts to be feelings and a connection, not to want to have the thing, but the kiss. Like he was thanking me, but it was like it was fucking way out for me. But it was like, you know what I mean? It's like, this guy's older. I'm being groomed. You know what I mean? You start being a part of something when you're a victim. What's happened is you believe it, you're a participant. Because I remember when he kissed me, I felt something not like that, but this guy really cared about me. I was protecting him. Thank you, Lang. People have to understand that what goes on the whole time because there was a part of me that ended up loving this guy. There was a connection. You know what I mean? There was a connection, but it wasn't sexual. But the kiss that came on, it was like it was like. And he looked at me and he said, thank you. And he said, I'm sorry. And I'm like, hey, cool, Kevin, you got to mellow out. And, I had this girl in the valley, this girlfriend. So mom's already pulled up and stuff like that. And then what finally happens is there's going to be a concert at the Forum, 1981. And it's with Cher. Cher just got done leaving Greg Allman. And Cher's with Les Dudak. And Les Dudak's putting together a band. It's called Black Rose. It's the only flop album Cher's ever had. Kevin's sister's boyfriend or husband plays bass guitar. He's a studio player. So what happens is we got these tickets for it, and we're gonna go back. We're gonna go backstage, and so we got Smalley Hatchet and stuff like that. So when we go there, go to the concert. After the concert, we're backstage and meet Cher, Les Dudak. One of the witnesses in my case was there, Robert Poehler, and we ended up leaving. So, you're doing constant coke and stuff like that, and never seen Cher do coke. So doing coke and stuff like that. And so what happens is we ended up leaving the concert, and we go back home. So when we go back home, we go to our place. I have my room, and I'm in my room. There's already been the gun with my mom pulling it. Already been pulled over once. There's been a couple, situations close to arrest. You got to remember this. It's now February. I turn 18 in July. It's the concert, February 11th, I think it was, at the Forum. We get back, so it'd be the morning of the 12th, and I'm in my room, and Kevin comes in with a gun, and I'm on my side, and he caresses me, and he tells me how much he loves me. The gun was like a... I guess it would be like a woman dressing up in lingerie. It wasn't as a threat. You know what I mean? I can't get into specifics. Well, it's in the case. Is he ended up doing some things to me, and then he ended up raping me. But the whole time that these things happen, that people have to understand, is the individual's telling that they love you. There was a foreplay with the gun. The gun was not held. There was oral copulation. It was like, this guy, he's had this, like it was coming. You know what I mean? He's been whining and dining me. Now he's doing me. You know what I mean? That's really what it was. So you have to ask yourself, are you a willing participant? I'm a kid. You know what I mean? There's, you come in, they know what they're doing. They're narcissists, Do I know if I would have fought it and went against it? Would have been a different story, probably. But you've been with somebody so long that knows you're not gay, stays away from you, see what he's doing, and it's not going to happen to you. But the whole time, it's you. It's you he wants. So there's confusion. I stayed with them. They ask you in my case, you stay with them. you're trying to say, hey, then there's the apology. It's not going to happen again. Like, I know you got a girlfriend. I just had these feelings towards. Don't you have feelings towards me? And then you're thinking, yeah, I did. And you're fucking confused. You got to be honest about it. If you're a survivor, you understand. You feel like you're a willing participant. That's why there's the guilt and shame. But you weren't willing. Yeah, you participated, but you're just a child. You were groomed. So one of the times as time go on, a few months go by before things come down, and we end up leaving the Odyssey. We come back to Miresk to drop Coke off, and Miresk, we get to Miresk. We've been up all night, and there's guns in there, and Kevin ends up pulling out the 9mm. So a couple months went by since the rape. Now Kevin pulls out the gun. He tells me to perform oral copulation on him. I said, what the fuck? And he threatened me. And I remember going through the motion. And he had the gun on my head, and he talked about my mom, and he thought it was funny. There was no love no more. That shit was a wrap. I knew exactly what he was about. Yeah. So what happened is Kevin at the time was having a relationship with a guy named Mark Spindler, who was 16 and a half. And not too long after that, he asked me to go after and get Mark. And my family already received a call that they were going to hurt my sister, that if my mom continued with working with the thing. So I went to go looking for this guy named Mark Spindler, and I'm carrying this 9mm. And I go up the stairs, and this guy drove me named David Usher. We were taking people's cars. I had like those Rolls Royce Corniche, taking, so we had this car. It was like a Charlie's Angels 2.2 Mustang, that white Mustang. I go up the stairs, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but Kevin wants Mark back. Mark's not there, so as I come down the stairs, the car takes off. When the car takes off, two cars pull up, and they got shotguns. It was going to happen. I think Mark wasn't there, and David Usher left me there. The guy that drove me there took off, so it was already prearranged. So I'm on La Tijera and La Brea in the alley, and these two cars pull up, and I got this gun, but it's heavy. I don't know, and I'm left-handed, and you hear boom, boom, boom. And I'm zigzagging, and I go in the liquor store on La Brea or La Tijera, and I got this gun in my thing. I got tears in my eyes, and help me, and they yell to get out of there. And I go out the liquor store. I go around the corner, and the telephone booth explodes. And there's a car in the front, and it's a Pontiac Grand Am, and it's blue with a black vinyl top, and the door's open, and he's yelling, "Lang, get in the car." I've seen this guy before in the bar, and I confronted him one time, and he knew my name, and he would always wear nice clothes, a little guy, black hair, and had these glasses, and I knew his name, Joe. Because I asked Joe, I said, "Do you want something? Why you fucking look at me?" He goes, "I know you. I'm just watching you, Lang Huff. Are you okay? How you know my fucking name?" So this happened prior, like down the road in the Odyssey. But this guy's in the front. They called him the Saint. And it's been verified that he owned the Saint bail bondsman. He was mafia. And he picks me up and he says, we got to get you out of here. I don't know. I think somebody knew that somebody was trying to kill me, and I think somebody was looking out for me. I think if anybody wanted me dead, it would have been Kevin, because Kevin was under investigation. And if it was Kevin, then it had to be the other people. I don't have that answer. All I know is that somebody saved me. I think Kevin wanted me dead because there was no Mark Spindler there. So Eddie Nash did have a connection to Italians. It was in the papers. If you go deep into it, you'll read the paper. There was some connection to it, but how far? They wouldn't have been involved when it came to what was going on at the Odyssey. So I got this gun on him. I'm out of my fucking mind. Lang. So they knew. So It'll blow you away. So you got the house here in the alley. It's in Inglewood. It's a short way, but you could already hear sirens. I'm in the back and I clean out. I wipe off the gun. I put it in an empty tire on the side of the garage in the back facing the alley, and they're here. So what happened is they put the cuffs on me. I look at him and he looks at me, and I know that he saved my life. And we get to Inglewood PD and we're separated. So, you know, I know not to say that this guy saved my life. So I'm in there and I take a couple blows from them from Inglewood PD, and I said I own you. I took one last hit. You know, I had to do something for Joe. You know what I mean. I'm not saying nothing. So finally, when I couldn't take any more beating, I looked at the cop and I spit blood at him, and I said, "My name's Lang Huff. My birthday's July 20th, 1963. I own you." And I said, "Get my mommy." I didn't say mother. I said, "Get my mommy." They cleaned me up and they got me to Daniel Freeman. So my aunt worked for Daniel Freeman. So when they got me there, they took care of me. My dad showed up. They've been trying to get me away from Kevin. You know, now I'm away. Don't know what's happened to Joe. And what I do know is after that happened, my mom was working with the investigators in Chief Darrell Gates. After that happened, while I was there was a raid on Miresk that Robert Puller was a part of. They raided it and got everybody in there, and they ended up taking Robert Puller and Kevin. They separated them. That was a sting in Inglewood, but they took him to Redondo Beach PD. Kevin ended up going to prison. What's funny about my story is that after I got beat up and I went to Daniel Freeman Hospital, my aunt, her name's Maxine Barrett, is my aunt married to my Uncle Tom. Kevin, when that shit went down, Kevin tried to kill himself because things were bad, and he took a whole bottle of Quaaludes, and they took him to pump his stomach to Daniel Freeman. So my mom got the call that Kevin was there. My aunt saved Kevin. My aunt pumped his stomach. Maxine Barron saved him. At that time, they ended up putting me in a hospital, so I ended up going to Westwood Hospital. I was protected there, so I had my real father's insurance, my stepdad's insurance. So I'm on Barrington and Bunday. I'm like with Kane Campbell, Glenn Campbell's son, you know, in the adolescent unit. I become friends with him. On the adult unit, you got the guy from Mario Speedwagon, the drummer, or 38 Special on the other side. So you got security. So what's weird about that story is going through my case, I was talking to my therapist. You know, she's a forensic, and the part about the connection to the groomer, the perpetrator, you know, and how you feel and things you can imagine being a kid. I kept telling her, I said, when I was in the hospital, I said, Kevin got me this ring. And, you know, she would write down, you know, because they have to make the determination if you're raped or not. They're forensic, you know what I mean? So we go through a lot. So I said, yeah. I said, yeah, Dr. Emmerich. I said, I get called to the front desk, and this lady hands me a ring. It's a gold ring with a ruby in it. Kevin got that ring there. Nobody knows how. So when I did all this stuff about Kevin and the case, I got a phone call about a year and a half ago from one of my witnesses. And Robert says, "You're alive, Lang. I found him for my case." And he said, "Do you still have that ring?" And I said, "What are you talking about, Robert?" He goes, "Kevin made arrangements and we dropped the ring off. Kevin wanted us to bring you coke, me and Anthony. I wasn't going to give you the coke, and he made us bring you the ring." And it was answered. My story was true, because when you see a psychiatrist, a forensic, you know, they talk about delusion, stuff in your head. You're a child, you've been traumatized. Lang actually believes that. It's probably in his head. There's a ring that exists, and his love for his perpetrator. But come on, did he really get a ring of that? Kevin really got the ring there. The ring really was there. So now to go a little bit in the story is with Eddie Nash. Eddie Nash was connected to a murders. They were called the Laurel Land Carter, the 4 on the 4 Wonderland murders. What took place is there was Eddie Nash was ripped off by John Holmes, who set him up, and he was ripped off by the Wonderland gang. That's where Eddie Nash was, tied up, and they stole from Eddie Nash. There was jewelry and a bunch of stuff. The ruby ring that I have came from that burglary as collateral. See, people had the misconception back then in the 80s stuff, thinking they had money. People would pay for your music people to have a ride. They'd pay for you to ride. You didn't have money. And an 8-ball back then went for $2.50. But back then, these people didn't even have that. You know? So that ring, as I was told, so is what happened. Yeah. You know, that's what I grew. That's what I was part of. So that leaves you broken. That's about it. We can go after that, but not today.
If you or someone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts, please call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. For victims of child abuse, domestic violence, or sexual assault, you can get help at the Safe Harbor inside the Family Justice Center by calling 805-652-7655. All services are free of charge and confidential. Addiction is treatable. Recovery from drug and alcohol problems start with a call or an email. For Ventura County Behavioral Health Substance Use Treatment Access Line, call 844-385-9200 or email sudservicesventura.org.